President Obama's Secretary of Defense. Before his appointment, he worked for 11 previous defense secretaries in both Democratic and Republican administrations. He was recently named director of the Belfer Center at the Harvard Kennedy School. He's also associated with innovation at MIT. Ash Carter, good morning.
Good morning.
Let me just ask the question with respect to this administration. What more can they do in Syria to make a difference?
Well, the Assad regime, you saw what happened recently. That is Bashar Assad. That is an atrocity. And the Russians are enabling that. And remember, when the Russians came in, Charlie, and you remember this, the Russians said that they were going to do what they ought to have done, which is to facilitate a political transition in which Assad is moved out. The structures of the Syrian state, not the regime, but some basics of governance remain, and the Syrian opposition becomes part of the government and restores this country to the decency that its people deserve. They didn't do that. Instead, they fueled the civil war.
So what can we do?
Well, for one thing right now is I think that additional sanctions on Russia, which a number on the Hill are calling for, is appropriate. And the Russians have responsibility for this, and they didn't do what they said they were going to do.
Responsibility meaning they carried out the attack?
No, they've enabled. Yeah. I don't have any reason to say that specifically. It's clear that the Assad regime did, and they are enablers and supporters. They didn't come in to end the civil war. They joined the civil war on the side of Bashar al-Assad.
But the Trump administration says that the Obama administration missed a great opportunity to solve the crisis in Syria. What's your response when you hear that?
I wasn't Secretary of Defense at that time, but we are where we are today, and that's where I'm realistic about where I was as Secretary of Defense. And I thought it was important that we keep the pressure on the Russians to do what they're supposed to do. Meanwhile, in the rest of Syria, don't forget, we have American troops there today who are very successfully doing what has to be done, which is destroy ISIL. Destroy ISIL in Raqqa, also Iraq, by the way, because that's necessary because that's not a civil war. They are intent upon attacking Americans, and we need to protect ourselves. And we need to destroy ISIL in Iraq and Syria because that's where it arose. And we need to destroy the fact and the idea that there can be an Islamic State based upon ISIL's ideology. So that's important, and we're doing that at the same time. In the civil war, our approach has been to try to promote an end to the civil war and not to fuel the civil war. That's not what the Russians
not to take out Bashar al-Assad.
Well, again, what the Russians said they were going to do was move Assad aside and the members of the regime.
But hold on a minute. 5 days before this attack happened, President Trump abandoned the goal of pressuring Assad to leave power. That was a shift in U.S. policy. Do you think that sent a message that allowed Assad to carry out this attack?
I can't say that. This is Assad's responsibility. I think it is important for us to have clarity about our policy and consistency in the enunciation of our policy.
We should talk about North Korea.
Yes, I was going right to that. Now, you know a lot about nuclear policy. Do you believe the North Koreans now have the capacity to deliver a nuclear weapon to America's coast?
I'm certain they're trying to get that capability,
all know that,
Charlie.
But, I mean, how close are they? Because some are saying they're this close.
I believe that they are intent upon getting there, and what we need to do about that and are doing about that, we've long anticipated that, is we stay one step ahead of them. That's, Charlie, why we improved our missile defenses of our own territory in both their number and their quality to protect ourselves. That's why we're deploying the so-called THAAD system in South Korea, which is so important. That's why we have 28,000 troops on the Korean Peninsula. So for job one, I'd like to see the Chinese especially turn the North Koreans around for reasons I can explain. I'm not optimistic about that, but we've tried for 20 years. It's worth continuing to try. But in the meantime, we have to deter and we have to defend ourselves. We stand strong on the Korean Peninsula. There's troops there right now. As we sit here right now, it's evening there. Their motto is fight tonight. And of course, nobody wants a war there.
But it means they're ready.
They are ready, and if the war came to the Korean Peninsula, I'm first of all confident that we would win. We would destroy North Korea's military and destroy the North Korean regime. But it is an intensity of violence that the world has not seen since the last Korean War. It's a very congested area around the DMZ. Many, many civilians would be killed in the process, in this process. So it's not something you can deal with lightly, but we are ready.
President Trump has a big meeting, of course, today, tomorrow, this weekend, with President Xi of China. The last missile test that the North Koreans launched, we saw the Secretary of State, Tillerson, issue a statement that says, the U.S. has spoken enough about North Korea. We have no further comment. Has the U.S. spoken enough about North Korea? Did you find that statement unusual?
Well, I think what's important is to act. And we've long been clear in opposing North Korean nuclear and missile, but also their general aggression and provocative posture on the Korean Peninsula. I think that much is clear. What isn't clear to me is whether the Chinese will ever exercise what they uniquely have, which is carrots and sticks that could influence the behavior of Kim Jong-un. You know, I've worked on this for a long time.
So why did the Chinese not do that?
I think there are two reasons, Charlie, both of which they fear the near term more than the far term. A lot of us are like that. And it's a natural tendency, but they know this is trouble in the long run, and so like the frog boiling in the pot, they haven't jumped. And the reason they haven't jumped, to your question, is twofold. One is they don't want to see a collapse of North Korea, and they don't want to see a war on the Korean Peninsula, because they know that that would result in a unified Korea quite likely aligned with the United States.
We're out of time, but remember the President of the United States, Donald Trump, said, if the Chinese are not prepared to go with us, we're prepared to go alone.
Yeah.
I believe today will be, he said he was going to be dealing with the Chinese on that, as well as very important economic
trade and other issues.
Trade and other issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Secretary Carter.
Very good to see you.
Likewise.